Hi. So, a lot of you have been tweeting me, emailing me, and messaging me about new hearings and new legislation regarding right to repair. And I haven't really been as active in it as I have in the past. And I'd like to explain why that is, and I'd like to explain where my focus is going to be going forward when it comes to the entire right to repair movement. And I'm probably going to disappoint a lot of you, but I hope not. So, the way I got started in being involved in right to repair really dates back to when I moved into this business. So when I took the leap from working on studio gear to working on Apple products and a lot of consumer electronics in general, I was very surprised by the fact that it was the complete opposite. You know, when you buy a Neve console, they gave you books that explained exactly how everything was put together so that that could be maintained 30 to 50 years after your purchase. And it was just natural in the professional broadcast industry that all equipment was distributed in this manner, where this manufacturer would give you some level of support. If they were unable to, there was so much documentation out there that you would be able to figure things out on your own if you were competent. And it may be difficult to find parts to something that's old, but you knew what you were looking for. And in this industry, it was entirely the complete opposite. No support whatsoever. The manufacturers mostly make the devices to be disposable. And if you are looking to do the type of work that we do, where we're trying to get data off of devices that have been in the ocean, and if you're doing stuff like what Jess is doing, or if you're trying to fix motherboards at component level that have spills on them, stuff that is doable, there's really no support out there. And I understand why manufacturers don't want to do this in their retail stores. I get that. But what I didn't understand was this real disdain at the idea of anybody else doing any of that work, even if it meant that customers would have no options to get their data if something like a backup didn't work, or a backup was corrupted, or their iCloud settings weren't right. It wasn't something that I understood. And as I got more and more involved in the business, I realized that it wasn't just me. Because when I started out with my little $268, I understood, okay, no company's going to want to deal with me. But then I figured out that multi-million dollar refurbishing companies don't have a source for schematics that's different than my little FTP server in the middle of Romania or Russia or whatever. That they're getting their parts off of this whole back of a truck thing in China, where a factory that was making stuff for Apple doesn't think they're getting paid enough. So they figure, well, we can make these parts for these people that want to buy them too, and let's sell to them. You know, it was. It wasn't until I was in my, let's see, like my early 20s when I started Rossman Supply around 21, 22, that I figured out that that was the supply chain. And as I got older, I think when I got to about 24, 25, I realized, I'm starting to get old. I don't really want to be doing this whole back of a truck thing for the rest of my life. And I realized that what I'm doing in many ways is helping people. When I got to the point where I had a store, when I got to the point where I was hiring people and paying them more than they made at their other crappy jobs, and I got to see the smile on a customer's face when they got their data recovered, and I was able to control Z their mistake or their carelessness, when I had, 600 phone calls a day from people that wanted what I had to offer, that couldn't afford to pay the entire 1,200 or 1,600 to get a new thing, but were willing to pay the 2 to 400 or sometimes $100, depending on what the issue was. I realized that this is something that's genuinely helping people. And I didn't like the idea that it was something that was looked down on as this whole bottom feeding industry of theft and getting stuff off the back of a truck. And I wanted there to be some legitimacy to what I did. And at that time, I defined legitimacy as what I do being considered legal. I didn't like the idea that the documents that I had on my computer were illegal. I didn't like the idea that the parts that I may or may not have imported may or may not have been snuck by some border control or customs agent that, if they knew exactly what was in the box, could use laws to say, no, you can't import that battery. No, you can't import this thing. And that bothered me. So I decided to get more and more involved in right to repair, which was this idea that companies should, to some extent, stop doing this stuff. And and now a lot of people have asked me, well, Lewis, you believe in free markets. You believe in smaller government. What's up with that? How is that smaller government when you're trying to legislate a right to repair bill? And the way that I was able to square that circle was very simple, because I believe that a lot of the force that companies use to do something like shut down a website that's sharing a picture of where a fuse is, or have people at the border confiscate batteries to cell phones and laptops, is through the power of government. it's really difficult for me to believe that when coming up with customs and law and the customs and all this stuff, that the idea was to keep people from getting batteries for their electronic devices that they used for everything. That the thing that you used as your business point of contact, that you used to make payments, pay bills, store records, deal with every aspect of your life, that you paid $1,000 for, that you could not get a battery for it when it's well known that those batteries die within 1 or 2 years. I don't think that the people who came up with that in government saw a future where these laws would be used to keep people from from importing a battery. Nor do I think they foresaw a world where large companies would use those law enforcement bodies to keep people from importing a battery. Nor do I think that the people who came up with intellectual property law ever thought it would be used to stop someone from sharing a document that shows where a fuse is on a $1,200 device that is ubiquitous and used by tens of millions of people across the country for work, for school, for personal, for serious projects. I don't think they had that in mind. So it was difficult for me to square that circle because I had to look and say, well, I believe in small government, but adding this law would seem to take away some of the tyranny of government that already exists, where the state is being used to crack down on people in a way that I don't think it was ever intended. And it was difficult for me to support this in my head because I see that I'm adding more legislation. Now, what it came down to for me in my mid-20s was, do I think it's good to push forward with making this more legitimate? And the answer was absolutely, and I didn't mind doing that through any means necessary. Now, when I remember when I posted a video on replacing this little resistor that's being used as a fuse so that that dies and makes your keyboard and trackpad and all that not work. I remember I did a video on that, and I showed on screen the location of a resistor that was being used as a fuse. And that video got way more views than I ever thought. I thought almost anything that I make would be limited to this community, which I thought was maybe 300 to 3,000 people. The idea that more than 3,000 people would watch was utterly astonishing to me. But it was a very widespread video. And when this video got more than 1 million views, I got a call from Kilpatrick and Townsend saying, hey, we've got an issue with the fact that you are showing this thing in this video. Would you be able to edit or take it down? You can't edit a YouTube video once it has a certain amount of views. So the only thing would be to take it down. And the idea that the law as it existed could be used to ask me to take down a video was nasty. And I remember thinking back to this one guy I met at CTIA that actually drove me to all the events because I don't have a car. And he was telling me how he actually had ICE show up at his store and confiscate stuff like the back glass to the phone and shit like this. And I lost my shit. Maybe it was overly paranoid of me, but I remember like taking anything that had an Apple logo on it in the store and putting it into a bag so that I could throw it away and thinking that that things were going to go very badly. And what actually happened is then I thought something terrible was going to happen. I made a video, which was, when I look back on it, admittedly an overreaction because I thought that ICE was going to show up at my door with, like guns and take all my crap and have a marshal put a lock on the door like they did to some of these other places. Which is kind of scary when that's your primary form of income. But I remember thinking, why is it that a government allows that? Why is this something that can happen? And so after that, I saw the support that came when people thought that that was actually going to happen. And it was at that point that I started to realize that this business has been made legitimate. And the way that it's been made a bit more legitimate, even if it is not in the law legitimate, is that people genuinely want the services that we offer, and they are willing to support the people who are being taken advantage of or targeted by these holes in legislation, by the holes in legislation where there may be a chance that something like that could happen to me if I kept that video up. And I did keep that video up. I think it's how unauthorized idiots repair Apple products. And somewhere between 50 seconds and a minute, you can still see that little section. I sent them back a very polite letter saying, if you would like this taken down, that's great, but I want you to do a DMCA claim so that it's public. That's all. Because I don't want people saying that I deleted it, just for the fuck of it. And I never heard back from them. And there was this thing that I learned about the law over the past few years. I guess it's a little bit something that I learned while I was seeing all these talks on immigration and what illegal immigration is, and DACA, and this, that, and the other. And one thing that I'm learning, especially not just from DACA, but from my experience, was that if enough people support something, it's almost kind of like people don't even care what the law is. Now, we can discuss whether or not that is good. I'm not going to say whether or not the immigration thing is good or bad. If you know me, you probably know what my opinions are on a lot of that stuff. But the point is that the strict letter of the law, that focusing on it is not the important part. What's important is the minds of the people that live in that area and influencing them to your cause. And that's where I look at the effort that I put into Right to Repair, and I look at what I've gotten out of it. And then I look at the effort that I've put into helping people understand what we do, but also getting people to enjoy what we do and what I've gotten out of that. And I have gotten far more out of making this seem like something that's fun than I have ever gotten from a legislature. And allow me to explain. So when it comes to legislature, I was so concerned with just any type of legitimacy or any step forward towards this not being some hiding in a basement, sharing schematics, worrying if anybody's going to get caught kind of thing, importing parts, half afraid that they're going to get taken by customs and blah, blah, blah. I was so desperate for any type of legitimacy that I never was focused on the actual viability of the legislation that was being written. I just wanted to get it any step forward. But now when I look at the legislation that we have failed to get passed almost anywhere, and I think about it, I look at the legislation and I see where it says things like, it must be sold at a reasonable price, or must be sold at the same price as is sold to manufacturers' vendors. It's very easy for me to understand how this could be manipulated, especially when it's something that's being done by force. So the law would be used to, by force, say you need to comply with this. Now, that's great, but when you force someone to comply, they're doing it when they're not doing it by choice. They're going to screw with you a little bit, So, for example, one thing, you're writing something subjective into the law. So when they say should be provided at reasonable cost or reasonable price, there are many drafts of these bills that have been written up using the word reasonable. Well, the first thing that I would ask is, what is reasonable? So there are people that have stores that think it's totally reasonable to charge $700 to $900 to a customer to replace a board that has nothing but a blown backlight fuse. To them, with their structure, that is totally reasonable. Then there are people that come in that I have, on very rare occasion, I've done this and I've said, rather than charge you for the repair in full, I will let you leave a voluntary amount that you find to be reasonable as a tip or something. And there are people that have taken out like $5 or $10. So there are many people that think that it's worth $200 to $400. Me. There are people that undercut me that think what I do is worth $90 to $100. There are people that charge more than what I do, where they're in that $500 to $900 range, and they think that's reasonable. And then there are people that think that what I do is worth, $10. So, and if you have a store, you know this because you're dealing with customers all day, and you can offer the same service at the same price. And you will have people, I had someone today that was referred by my friend Jake, that literally gave me a hug. So happy that I was able to help her. She actually gave me a hug. She asked about giving me a hug. And there are people that will say, they will leave a 1-star review calling you a ripoff when they walk out, because there is that much of a subjectiveness to what is reasonable. So when you write into the law reasonable price, well, what's reasonable? Who defines reasonable? Is the person who defines reasonable someone that can be paid off or corrupted? In either way, is that someone that's going to set the price of reasonable below what it actually costs to manufacture? Or is that somebody that's going to get bribed or something where they're going to say that reasonable is, the cost of the entire device? Who defines reasonable? The next is when you say, okay, or what they sell that component to the repair center for. Well, there's a difference between the cost of selling a part to a repair center for a manufacturer than there is selling it to the Apple manufacturing plant. For example, the cost of assembly, how do I put this? An Apple authorized service center may buy a display assembly at a different price than what it actually costs to make it. So let's say, for example, let's say we're talking about Apple authorized service centers. If I'm asking to buy a specific part, what if they don't actually repair the device in that way? So, for example, with, let's say, an LCD screen, the Apple Authorized Repair Center will actually replace the entire top case of the machine. So they'll replace this. Let's get one over here. They'll replace this. This thing is all damaged anyway, so I don't care if I bang it around. They'll replace this entire lid, whereas we will replace just the LCD screen. So if a right to repair bill is passed, getting past the concept of reasonable, what if the part that I ask for is not something that they offer because that thing that I asked for is something that they don't even sell? See, my issue is not even so much with this as it is with the exclusivity agreements that are made with companies like LG and AU Optronics and Samsung. So even as that bill is written, even if that bill was passed, I would still not get access to the thing I want. I don't want to buy the display assembly, which costs half the price of the computer. I want to be able to buy this thing without customs, without somebody getting involved, so that I can buy my 5 or my 600 AU Optronics or LG or Samsung things and replace just this, so that I can offer a better deal to the customer that they're happy with and that makes sense for us from a labor perspective. Now, these are all complex issues that even if you do get past all of the hurdles of actually getting the bill passed, you still have not fixed. You've made the industry look more legitimate, and you have something on the law books, but there's a big back and forth there over things like what is reasonable. So if you're selling that part to us at the same price as you would your own service centers, maybe Apple raises the price that they sell the part to the service centers of. Again, when you put a gun to somebody's head, they're not always going to be very nice at complying. They're kind of going to try to undermine you and screw with you. That's the nature of it. So, well, what if they did something like raise the price of the parts that they sold to their authorized service centers, but then gave them something like a performance rebate at the end of the year based on the services that they did, or a bonus where they would essentially charge more for the part because they want, they want to give us a middle finger, which I would understand, and then give a rebate to the repair center. That's something that that's what I would do. I'm just thinking if somebody put a gun to my head and said I had to do this, how would I respond? And that is I would respond with a screw you. Even if I was in the wrong. It's just, natural human nature. When you're being forced to do something, the lizard brain is going to say, well, how do I resist that? How do I hashtag resist that in some way? Don't hashtag resist. But and there's so many more issues that are like this. Like, what about the things that their repair centers don't even do? Well, what are the different tiers of the other repair centers? Because it says manufacturer authorized repair center or facility or something like that. But what about the non-authorized? Which one? What if they say, well, our authorized repair centers don't use ISL 6259s, but when they send the board back to China, Foxconn does. Are they talking about them? Are they talking about their prices? If so, how do we get access to their pricing structure if that entire thing is done solely in China? It's really hard to think through all of these things. And when you think through all these things, I genuinely believe that I could put my best foot forward. I could spend years traveling, lobbying, and if I actually get something like this passed, it won't do shit for me. And that would be very, very sad. Now, there is the alternative approach, which is the approach that I have seen great dividends from so far, and that I think actually has the chance to create positive ongoing change into the future in a much more sustainable manner. And I think that before I get on to what that solution is, I should discuss how it has worked in other businesses. Let's just use, for an example, the music business. So I grew up, I remember I was a teenager. I was 13 years old in 2002, and I remember when Napster was getting popular, when Napster was shut down, when Kazaa was getting popular, when Kazaa got overloaded, then Nutella was the next big thing. Then after that, eMule and BitTorrent, and then after those all kind of started to turn to shit, people were using Usenet, all these different things, and people were using Usenet long before that. But I digress. After all this stuff, people tried so hard. There were boycott sites for the Recording Industry Association of America. There were all of these people that wanted media the way that they wanted it. Some of them were just a bunch of dicks that wanted everything to be free because they were a bunch of dicks. And some of them were people that actually would be willing to pay if they could receive media the way they wanted it. No, I'm not going to wait at a bus stop while it's raining to take a 1 hour trip back and forth to Blockbuster to get a DVD that's fucking scratched. I've done that many times before, never again. Or they could pay a few bucks, click something, take a shower, have something on the stove cooking, come back out. Oh, look, my stuff's ready to watch in any format I want, without digital rights management on any device. Easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. I have that commercial stuck in my head from the late 90s. It's killing me. Anyway, hopefully it's not stuck in your head now, too. Regardless, there were many attempts made for the law to be changed in certain ways so that it was more friendly to people that wanted to consume content the way they wanted to consume it. And the law never really changed. What you had were companies like Apple that were able to strong arm these agreements to allow the content to be sold the way they wanted to be sold it, but it took a multi-billion-dollar company coming along to try to solve the problem, and the stuff that you downloaded, you only had the option of downloading it lossily. You had to download it through the specific store. Sometimes stuff had digital rights management. Some stuff was missing. It's like, and ultimately, it didn't really. There was still a bunch of people torrenting and Usenetting and all this type of stuff, and it wasn't until many, many record labels crumbled that that things changed. Now, the thing is, I remember my generation. My generation was the generation that if you said, here's an album that cost $250,000 to produce, that was an amazing, awesome album, good quality, it's $20. They would say $20 for a CD is a ripoff. They would think that that was not worth paying for. And there's an argument as to whether or not that's worth paying for, but that is what I observed from my generation. So many people thought 15 to 20 bucks, I'm not spending that on music. Now, that same generation, I remember mentioning this in a few streams. I was on Twitch one time, and I saw this kid playing this keyboard. He was in a room that looked much crappier than this. It looked like one of my first apartments, that little dumpy $700 thing in $700 thing in Canarsie or Bushwick. It was this dumpy-ass place, and he was playing music on his keyboard, and it was pretty good. I mean, he seemed like he was pretty talented. And I saw people donating. And I tallied up the donations over about a 9 or 10 or 20 minute period around there. And the donations came out to about $217. And I've done this a few times with different people on Twitch, just observing. And I remember this one time it was about $217. And I remember just out of curiosity asking people in the chat who had donated, just out of curiosity, around what age are you? And a lot of them were around my age. So what I found interesting is that there were, from the same generation where people were absolutely just refused to spend money on music, and they demanded that it be available. They refused to spend money on the old paradigm of CDs and whatnot, and of buying it off of, buying an MP3 file and this all that stuff with DRM and crap on it. They refused to do that. They refused to spend $20 for the album that cost $250,000 to produce. But when a kid on a cheap keyboard with crappy production quality is streaming on Twitch and shows that he's talented and good, people are willing to donate to him $217. And that's not an experience. That's not something that they own. That was a stream that's going to be gone when the stream is done. And they paid for that. And they were willing to pay for that. They were willing to pay more in donations for a single stream that was produced cheaply than they were for an album that cost $250,000 for the group to produce. And what this told me is that there is this paradigm shift that occurs when the new generation comes to power, or when the new generation starts to do everything. So when you're 13, you are probably not old enough to set up your own band and all this stuff. But when they're 18 or 20 or 25, when they want to distribute their own music, the people who grew up in my generation didn't decide, okay, we're going to find a record label, then we're going to get an advance, then we're going to sell to the record label, and then we're going to sell our CD at Best Buy and all these record stores. No, they didn't want to do that. They went straight to Twitch. They went to YouTube. They went to their website, and they did what we did in our generation. Here's a Patreon link. If you like it, here's a donate link. Here's an ad that you can watch in the beginning of the video. And there are groups that are very talented that have no record label support, where I see that they're getting, $6,000 every time they make a new song, or $20,000 an album on Patreon, or a few thousand a month for independent musicians. So we've clearly come up with a model that works. And I think that the way that we came up with that model over time was by getting people really interested in the concept of the indie music scene, and supporting that indie music scene. And I wonder if the same thing is something that would occur when it comes to repair. Hear me out here. So I get these messages every now and then from people that started their own repair shops because they watched these videos. One of the most rewarding parts of my job, I have to say probably the most rewarding part of ever having done YouTube, is the comment section. Kidding. No, the most rewarding part of doing YouTube was getting these letters or getting these emails where people were sending me pictures of their stores that they created from nothing, just from stuff that they learned from watching these videos. That is really awesome, really humbling, really heartwarming, and it's been what made all of this fun, even when you're dealing with stuff that is not so fun. So there was this email that I got about a week ago from somebody, and I was reading through, and it was, Lewis, I love your channel, love your videos, blah blah blah. And there's this one part of it where he links to a project that he created, some little hardware project. He created a PC board. He created the code for it, and he was showing me what it was. And he said, this is something that I probably wouldn't have gotten into, but I love watching your videos. They inspired me to get into electronics, this, that, and the other. So I click, and I'm looking at this thinking, I don't know how to design a PCB. And then I see that there's all this software that he coded for this thing, and I'm thinking, I can barely patch my own Magento website without screwing something up half the time. How did you learn any of this from me? I didn't teach you any of this. I can't take credit for any of this. I mean, I appreciate that you're emailing me saying that my videos inspired some of this, but I can't take credit for that. I'm a janitor. I look in a microscope. I reattach traces. My best understanding of schematics is essentially, it's like playing connect the dots for the most part. But what I realized is that where I may have succeeded, where I didn't think I was, is in making this look fun. Making repair look exciting, making electronics and maybe even design, and making something work again from nothing, and the happiness of seeing the fan spin and solving a problem using electronics fun and cool, and something that people actually would watch. I always say I have no idea why there's 200 or 300 people watching a stream of me fixing a motherboard, but if 200 or 300 people, and I've had up to 2,000 at times watching a live stream of me fixing a board, if there's so many people watching, well, maybe my opinion doesn't really matter. Maybe it is something that people actually find fun, or a genre of entertainment in and of itself. And what I think is that as this generation of people grows up and finds design fun, finds repair fun, finds investigative repair under a microscope with a power supply and a multimeter and soldering gear and schematics and all that to be cool rather than boring, well, that's where the real change is. Just like my generation grew up and couldn't imagine getting regular deals with record labels to produce music, opposed to the I'll release it for free and pay me what you want through these means, thanks a lot. I think the same thing is going to be true when my generation starts to get more involved in design, engineering, and even more so as my generation gets involved with management of so many of these companies and gets involved in management of new companies. I can't imagine that somebody who started watching my videos when they were 16 in 2014, who now, maybe close to, halfway through college, when that person gets a job or decides to start their own company or engineering firm or design firm, after seeing that this inspired them to get started, or seeing that watching videos from STS Telecom or Chris Long or Jessa Jones at iPad Rehab or any of the other people that make good videos in this business, if they got into it by becoming a part of this small repair community, I can't imagine them one day just starting a company and saying, no, we're not going to tell you where the backlight fuse is. No, we're not going to give you the documents. And if you release it, we're going to have our $1,200 an hour law firm call you and tell you that we want you to take down that material. I don't think that they're going to say, oh, yeah, well, this is the chip that's broken. Oh, you want to buy it? Fuck you. I don't think that they are going to, I don't think that the people that grew up watching this stuff in an entertaining fashion, who were inspired to get involved in engineering and design from the content that we all produce, I can't see them using the power of United States Customs Enforcement to keep people from importing parts to fix the devices that they sold. I don't see them using these powers. I see them as rejecting it. And I think that's the real right to repair, not at the legislative level, where even if I pass every single one of those hurdles, I'm just signing up for a bunch more hurdles from people that hate me. I think the real right to repair, the true right to repair, is getting people involved, getting people excited, getting the next generation to think that this is fun. This is cool. You know, I could watch a rerun of this TV show, or I could watch Jessa try to figure out why that phone has error 4013. And I'm on Jessa's streams. You know, she used to have like 7 to 10 viewers. Then she had 20 to 50 viewers. Now she's got sometimes 100 viewers. And, you know, she's going to be up to that 2,000 number very soon too, I'm sure. And maybe more, because more and more people are getting involved. They're getting excited. They enjoy it. And when even a minority of those people get involved and start their own businesses, I think they're going to reject all this crap. I think they're going to reject the policies of let's make our devices impossible to service. Let's make sure it's as closed source as possible. Let's ensure that not only is it as closed as possible, but if somebody wants to get a battery for it, hey, F you. I don't see that happening. And I think that that's what I want to focus my time on. I want to focus my time on people getting involved in the repair industry. I want to focus on people finding what we do to be exciting and fun. I want to focus on making sure that people who want to get into this do not have to go through the garbage that I went through when I started in this specific sub-niche of it in 2008 and 9, not having any idea where to get parts, not having any idea what tools work, not having any idea, any idea where to buy the adhesive, any idea what soldering station to buy or what was affordable, any idea how to figure out any of this stuff. You know, I want to make sure that for the people that want to get involved, that find this fun, that there's something there for them. I think that's what's going to pay in dividends, not lobbying and spending years and years of time to try to get a bill passed that says that they have to sell me something at a reasonable price where a third party sets what reasonable is. I think, and you know, I think that's going to be the true catalyst for right to repair going forward. And that's why I just haven't been as involved in the legislative stuff as I was before. You know, my lease is until 2023. I intend to stay here until 2023. I intend to stay here fixing stuff until 2023 at the very least. I intend to continue figuring everything out. I intend to do videos when we figure out how to fix common issues in the touch bars and how to fix common issues in the 12-inch Retina. And I'm sure Jess is going to continue doing videos and how to fix all these different issues with iPhones that need data recovered from them. And her channel is going to grow. And Jason at STS Telecom's channel is going to grow. And Jason at Micro Soldering Supply, if he ever listens to me and stops writing blogs that nobody reads rather than doing videos, is going to have a channel that grows. And Chris Long's channel is going to grow. And all these people that are getting normal everyday folk that didn't know that this was cool involved in repair, that's what's going to actually change something. So that when the next generation comes in, it's not going to be like, oh, we changed the law, we changed all this stuff, but rather we're going to have a generation of people that say, yeah, I see that there's a law there that would allow me to screw you over for working on our stuff, but I would never want to use it. One example is this thing called the Fairphone. So there's this phone, and admittedly, I haven't done a lot of research into it, but somebody wants to come up with a phone that's built to actually last rather than be disposable. They want it to have a good supply chain. So this is not the type of phone where, you know, if you need a battery, you get told it's $199 or $299 because they don't want to replace it in the store for the first 3 or 4 years it's produced, like some companies. It's a phone that is supposed to have a fair supply chain. And it looks like this is something that's made by a company that actually gives a shit. And that, you know, this is where legitimacy comes from. Legitimacy, in my opinion, is not something that's just the result of the law. It's a result of a great majority of the people saying, hey, we like what you're doing. And when we have a choice or when we have a chance to make decisions someday, we're going to make decisions in favor of what you're doing. When someone becomes an artist, they reject the old paradigm and decide we're going to release direct to the people, and we are going to take donations or support in any way, shape, or form that you would like directly from the people. When we are able to become engineers, or when we have that knowledge, we are going to produce products that reject this system, that reject this thing where you can't even import a battery because it'll get seized by customs, you know, like where the government, where a corporation is using the power of government, or a government that, in my opinion, is too large, to tyrannically confiscate your battery. I think that this is where the world is going, and this is where right to repair is going moving forward. And I think that the best way to be a part of that is to ensure that as many people as possible that find this entertaining and fun have both the resources to get involved or content to watch that entertains them to keep them in support of what we do. Because if you don't really know what we do, if you're not really invested in what we do, then, well, who cares if anything's repairable or not? But if people have spent countless hours watching and having fun and enjoying the chats and enjoying the community and really having that sense of accomplishment that as Jessa turns on the phone to see if she can get to the passcode screen or not, if they've had that feeling of happiness and excitement when they see that Jessa recovers the data along with her, they're never going to grow up to be people that reject what it is that we're looking for. They were watching at 1 in the morning when I was spending 20 minutes on some crazy repair, and they shared in the excitement of seeing the fan spin, and they saw, investigative electronics repair as something that was entertaining and fun and exciting. And then they decided to get into the business. And I have a feeling that that individual is not going to be the type of person that decides that they're going to use customs and intellectual property law and all of this stuff so that if a fuse blows in that device or a battery dies in it, that the end user who bought it is screwed. I don't think that is their intention. And that is the real right to repair, in my opinion. That's what's actually going to matter going forward, is getting people to realize that what we do in many ways is fun. Getting someone to share in the joy of seeing a fan spin, getting someone to share in the joy of, after working on the puzzle, getting to the screen where you can type in the password and recover the data from a dead phone and things of that nature. And that's what we need. We need that more than we need the legislation, in my opinion. So that's why I am kind of not spending as much time pushing the legislation so much as, maybe this was kind of a incoherent, rambling rant, but those are my thoughts on it. That's kind of how I've been squaring the circle. And I haven't done a lot of videos recently. Part of it is I've honestly I needed a break. I mean, I've done like 600 videos, 700 videos on the exact same topic. It kind of got old. Also, my streaming computer died, so I'm waiting to get parts to fix it. I'm doing these videos using my Lenovo with this little USB to HDMI thing, but I can't combine that with microscope, and I can't combine it with the other camera or anything, so it wouldn't really be any fun to do any repair videos with this, but I hope to be back soon. Thank you very much to all the people who've watched. Thank you to all the people who've learned something. Thank you to the people that have gotten involved in this business and actually put the stuff that I post here to good use. And yeah, that's about that. And happy repairing.